Why are there ridges on Reese's peanut butter cups? Probably so they never slip from her hands. Could you imagine? I'd lose it. Luckily, Reese's thought about that. Wonder what else they think about. Probably chocolate and peanut butter.
Hey, warmer from the low! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Eaps Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, as right now we're at the time of the offseason where we've got a lot of two-part chats because we don't have a lot of college basketball news that's going on, but a man that always delivers the goods is Colby Dant. He does such excellent work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, and we're going to be chatting with him about how he gauges freshmen, how he gauges these junior college guys, and we're going to be talking a lot about the American. There's a lot of teams that are going to be under pressure in the American this season. We're going to be chatting with him about one of his big-time just loves of East Carolina. The East Carolina Pirates are going to be looking for a relatively solid year, so we're going to be chatting about that. And then we are also going to be looking at just some of the other teams out there in the American. Can someone dethrone Memphis? Who's all on the hot seat? We're going to be talking about that and so much more. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to on this podcast via that 5-star review. And while I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, everything is powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to have access to their funds whenever and wherever they want. With EdgeBoost, they make sure that they are available for you 24/7, 365. All those deposits, they all get approved. And when you go to edgeboost.bet, put in that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That gets you a dollar for dollar match on your first deposit up to $25. Now let's chat with the man, the myth, the legend, and Colby Dant, who does such amazing work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at the Colby D all together, as he also does just amazing work on the college football front as well, the college experience that he and Ryan McIntyre does. It is absolutely top notch, and Colby, you are top notch. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me, Greg. Always a pleasure to hop on board, and we're getting closer and closer to college hoops, so life is always grand when you can see it coming.
Yep, absolutely. We need to get closer and closer because, man, it is the dog days of summer right now. We don't even have football to hold down the fort, so hopefully enjoy baseball betting because that's been a lot of fun this summer. But that said, Colby, I do think that it is so interesting preparing for the upcoming season, and I've been talking about this on the podcast the last few days. I always like to this time of year try to hone in on what my weaknesses are, and for me, it's gauging freshman and junior college transfers, and I feel like we've had this conversation in the past in which we both agree that it's a little bit difficult to be able to gauge these guys, and how do you go about trying to be able to do so? Because I think that this is one of the biggest riddles to do in this day and age where, frankly, you just don't know how these guys are going to translate to a Division I college level.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly hard to do these days, not only just projecting teams with so many transfers where you're like, this guy got 3 minutes at Tulsa. How's his impact going to be at UT Martin? You just don't know. But high school one, I still think there's a little more validity to the high school tape. You know, like Cooper Flagg was one where everyone was raving about it. You watch the tape and you're like, yeah, he looks pretty good. You still want to wait until you see it on the college level, but that didn't take very long. Certain players just jump off screen, especially today's day and age. I feel like, you know, and this goes for football, baseball, basketball. I cover all three for college sports for the college experience. And you feel like teams are kind of going for the transfer gets to get older in a way. You know what I mean? Like you look at even your best college football teams. Yes, recruiting matters and bringing in talent and keeping that talent there matters, but I also think you're trying to get older. The teams that have all had success, I feel like, not all, but a good chunk of them have been older teams. Obviously, Duke was the team that went very far last year, but for the most part, if you're not Duke or a few other teams, I feel like the blueprint is to get older. It's hard to really gauge how much time these young kids will play. The JUCO ranks I find to be a complete mystery. Like the JUCO ranks, like it's hard to even find tape for some of the guys, and which is almost impossible. You would think in 2025, where everyone does a
high schoolers have tape for like their little 500 school high school.
I can find tape of like my nephew brushing his teeth on Instagram. You can't find
Zakuta film.
You can't find that. This guy transferred into Oregon State. I'm sitting there just on a deep rabbit hole on the internet typing in, so-and-so and just trying to find any bit of tape. JUCO, to me, still the hardest to get a gauge of. Like high school, I still think okay, well, these guys are talented. Maybe they don't get major minutes year one. I think that your top like 50 to 100 kind of do. But deeper along the lines, you're sitting there saying, like, I got no idea if this guy's going to play. This is something you got to wait until media days and ask the coach. You know what I mean? So, especially with the sport that's grown older, it's kind of flipped from 15 years ago where you'd start so many freshmen, or 10 years ago, you'd start so many freshmen. I know you have Duke's example last year, but there's not many of those over the past 5 years since the portal went crazy. So, the JUCO one, I know there's websites out there. I've had people send me websites. You could check this, check this. It's still hard to gauge. You just don't know who they're going up against. You know what I mean? So it's incredibly hard to gauge. But high school, there's a little bit of validity to it that I still kind of hold key. But this is college basketball. And we haven't even talked transfer portal because that's one of the hardest elements here. And that's what's great about the game, in my opinion. I know for the lay fan, I grew up in ACC country in the Washington, D.C. area when Maryland and Virginia and everybody were rolling. Name recognition was a big thing. Your lay fan, it was important that you knew Walt Williams was the shooting guard for Maryland and Ralph Sampson was the big man for Virginia and so on and so on. I'm dating myself here, but nowadays it's not like that in many ways. You get a new team almost every year to a certain extent. There's that, but I think the game's actually stronger knowing that you can, if you're a diehard like us, Greg, and I'm curious how you would feel about this, but I feel like the fact you can go out and address a weakness of your team in the portal makes it much more interesting as a fan. You know what I mean? Like as a fan of certain teams or just curious, just from a bird's eye point of view covering the sport. If like, man, and I'm just me, doing hypothetical, but if Weber State couldn't rebound last year and man, you like their guards, but they went out and brought in some big men and you're like, hey, maybe they can rebound this year. And if they can rebound, those guards are good. So then to me, it's fascinating in that regard. But for the lay fan, I do think that is an issue, too, with the transfer portal. But it is hard to get a gauge on, too, man. Like, you're looking for guys that are you're breaking down UT Martin's roster. You're like, this guy played 1 minute a game at Wisconsin. Is this guy going to be good? I have no idea, But, yeah, I mean, the welcome to college basketball. I still think it's the greatest sport on the planet, and I can't wait for it. And I think the game's only gotten stronger for certain areas, for the hardcore fan, I would say.
Absolutely, as we do have Colby Dant, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And when it comes to gauging these junior college guys, how much do you just bank on the coach that in the past has been able to find these guys? Like, I take a look at what UAB has been able to do, and for UAB, like, I recall what Andy Kennedy was able to do with finding Yaxel Lendeborg, Alejandro Vasquez, don't call his name. Like, those were two really good junior college transfers. And a lot of people forget Chad Baker-Mazara was that for Auburn. We saw what he was able to do. How much do you just trust in some of these coaches that hit in terms of these junior college guys versus the ones that, well, they don't hit?
No, actually, that's probably the best way to track it. Honestly, man, I guess I should have said that, but I think you just made my case for me. Like, the best way to track it is probably just trusting the coach that scouts them, because some of them you're sitting there like, okay, right. Andy Kennedy's a guy that I feel like has been doing it for a while. Even when he was at Ole Miss, I feel like he was going for the JUCO route. There's certain coaches that have had success doing this. I want to say Dutcher has brought in a couple over the years that have been very good. Was Tyler Perry?
I think that he might have been over at North Texas. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just in my head thinking, because that was what McCaslin when he got him, I think. Like, yeah, just trusting certain coaches and their talent evaluation. I think that's probably the best way to track the JUCO ranks because, like I said, even if you find tape, then you got to research who they're playing, right? And then you're sitting there saying, who is this team? You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I mean, you could find some really bad teams on the JUCO level, so it could be tricky. But, yeah, I would say you are spot on with that. Follow the coaches that you can trust. They're kind of like a name brand you can trust. Is Andy Kennedy's and the Brian Dutchers, Grant McCaslin. I don't think McCaslin's done it a ton, but I just know in my mind I thought
Greg Campy over at Oakland too.
Yeah, Campy. I feel like every year get somebody involved there. That would be, in my opinion, probably if I was telling someone that was just getting into the game. How would you track that? It's probably the best way to do it.
Yep, absolutely. And coaches we trust, and even with all the player movement, even with everything that is going on in this day and age, I do think that it is really critical to do. And Colby, I know that you are a big-time stan of East Carolina, and I know you got some thoughts on the Americans, so we're going to get those thoughts of Colby next. We're also going to be chatting with him about some of the coaches out there in the American that might be on the hot seat, how his East Carolina Pirates are going to be faring, can someone knock off Memphis, and so much more. We're going to be chatting about that next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Great to be rejoined by Colby Dant. He does such an amazing job over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Also does an amazing job on the college football side of things as well. He pretty much handicaps all forms of football, so he's a great resource there. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at the Colby D. And Colby, I know you're quite a bit of a fan of the American Conference, and more specifically the East Carolina Pirates out there in the American. I think that it's setting up for a really interesting year where I'm feeling like South Florida has a chance to be able to win the conference. I absolutely love the fact that they brought in Brian Hodgson in the offseason, who did such a great job over at Arkansas State. But how do you take a look at both your guys with the Pirates, who it feels like they've been building some upward momentum? It certainly has been better than it was just a few short years ago. But how do you take a look at them and just this entire conference where I think that there's a lot of intrigue? And we just talked about UAB, the Blazers. I think that they're in a little bit of transition this year as well.
Yeah, but I'm sure they'll be more talented than I think. Once again, and just trust the coaching pedigree there. But East Carolina is an interesting one because I don't understand why we've been bad for so long. When you're in North Carolina, you've seen so many other schools be good at basketball within the conference. Even App State, has made a run, which wasn't traditionally a basketball school, but Wilmington, High Point, I'm only naming the mid majors here. Davidson, obviously, Elite Eight run with Steph Curry, but just McKillop had that thing rolling. Even Asheville has had more success than ECU in the postseason because ECU hasn't been to the tournament, I think, since 91. I can tell you this. I thought last year, for an instance there, we might have had a decent shot to win that tournament because we were playing pretty good ball towards the end of the year. And Mike Schwartz, as much as there's games where I would love a shooter. He comes from the Rick Barnes school, and one thing he has instilled, I think, is a decent culture. And they're going to play hard. They're going to get after it, to his credit. But I am a little concerned also that R.J. Felton and C.J. Walker are gone. But, Jordan Riley was a guy that I was surprised Temple let get away. If you watched ECU last year, Jordan Riley, I think he averaged like 14, 15 points. And then he was just super explosive. He's been recruiting at a good level too. Probably the best at East Carolina in a decent amount of time. I know the Dooley era, I still think Schwartz has been recruiting at a much better level than that. And, they attack the portal some. But, yeah, look, I'm kind of buying in. He's established culture. He was, first 2 years kind of flirting with 500, ended up on losing seasons, but I think 16 and 17, and then, something very similar the second year. And then last season was a little bit of a breakthrough, even though, just because you tied for fifth, and ECU hadn't been fifth in the American in a long time, if ever. I don't think ever, personally. I'm trying to think maybe 1 year. Maybe 1 year when the league just started. I'm optimistic. And I do think the more you have these other conferences swipe down and steal, some of your better programs in basketball, like SMU's gone. Houston, obviously, Cincinnati and UCF, and those teams had all had postseason success in basketball. Someone's got to stand out from the pack. Now, obviously, Memphis spends on a different planet than everybody in the conference on basketball, but I think that's one of the big storylines in this conference this year. I think, from what I understand, talking to East Carolina people, Schwartz is safe. They like the progress that has happened there. They got to have a pulse a little bit this year. And I'm curious. I think we might, if we could take a step forward and that young talent develop, I think we could, be maybe a sleeper in the conference. But the conference in general is kind of at this point. I was just looking at it the other day where there's a lot of coaches' pennies, I think, in an interesting spot. I kind of think he won't be coaching there next year if I had to bet, just because I don't really like the class he brought in. They're under some type of probation from the NCAA, which I don't even understand how that even happens anymore. You look around the conference, it's kind of, your big year for Ron Hunter. We love Ron Hunter on this show. Obviously, the crazy Georgia State days with that NCAA tournament run falling out of the chair. But you look at his record at Tulane now, he's kind of got the program to a little bit of a more competitive spot than they were prior. But he's 89 and 89. the definition of average right now. I don't know. I think it's a big year for him, and if maybe they can make the tournament, you still, I think, would have to favor Memphis coming into this thing. How about Conkle at Tulsa? I think he is coaching for.
He's gotten a lot of runway.
Oh yeah, I think him. I think Paul Mills at Wichita. Wichita has resources. I don't understand how they've been so bad lately, but that's another one where I feel like what's going on here. And then I'll even take it to Adam Fisher at Temple. I mean, Temple's a school that a lot of basketball pride. If you know any Temple Owl fans, or they had a lot of good years with Fran Dunphy and John Chaney, and I think he's entering year 3. So you'd say, man, I don't know, but you got to win now. And last year he might have just been a game or two over 500, if memory serves me correct. But you're at Temple, and when in this conference, I feel like where you have so much turnover, where the teams that are going up, you should, if I think a Temple Owl fan expects to be in first or second place based off their history, or Wichita State, same situation. Tulsa has a rich history, believe it or not. So I can remember the days of them making the Elite Eight with Eric Coley and Bill Self and company, and then even Danny Manning, got him to the tournament. So those are programs that have had winning histories. For whatever reasons, they haven't been able to figure it out. Now, it is interesting you bring up South Florida. We'll see how they do. Obviously, it was such a terrible set of events that happened last season with them. The conference seems a little bit more open than previously, in my opinion. You would have to say Memphis is the most talented team in the conference, but I kind of think there's a little blood in the water there, and the fact it could be open for a few different teams to make a run. So as an ECU fan, why can't it be us, right? Wasn't that Jim Harbaugh's thing? Or something like that. What I'm excited to see too? I'm excited to see the second year of Rob Lanier at Rice. I thought he did a decent job at SMU to get fired. So I'm kind of excited to see what he can do with that Rice Out program. Andy Kennedy, that's another one. I'm just going to trust that if you told me right now blindly, I think it comes down to chalk of UAB and Memphis. But South Florida, I think, could go to higher. Now we'll see how fast he could put it together. I'm curious, besides Memphis and UAB, it seems like you've already said South Florida, but what other schools do you think could be coming up in the American this year?
I do think that Tulane is actually in for a relatively solid year. I know that you were mentioning the fact that it is probably going to be a make or break year for our guy, Mr. Hunter, and I do agree with you. I think that is a put up or shut up year, but I really like the talent that they've got on the roster. I think that they've got the potential with Rome Brumbra, Asher Woods in the backcourt, that they could be able to do a nice job. And then I still think that UTSA with Austin Claunch, they bring back Primo Spears from a season ago who took better shots. I think that they could be one of those sneaky teams that maybe they're not like a top 3, top 4 team, but I think that they're being slept upon. And I think the big thing for them is just getting any sort of rebounding whatsoever.
Yeah, they were an ATS darling second half of the season. I had a lot of fun with them. Another coach that I should mention, I think Fern from Charlotte is on shaky ground too. You took over for Sanchez when he left for Virginia abruptly. He had a good first season, even though they didn't make the tournament, finished third in the AAC, if memory serves me correct.
Made some money in the CBI off of them.
Yeah, but man, I worry that if you have another really bad season, I think Charlotte has had a new athletic director in his I could be mistaken, but I believe, I got to remember exactly when Sanchez left, but I believe they have a new athletic director in that reign. So that would be an interesting one to follow because, once again, Charlotte, I still feel like much in the same vein as East Carolina. Charlotte probably even more. You're in somewhat of a major city. You're in a great basketball state. Why are you not better? And it's been a show for them for a while. Pardon my language, but I'm just saying, with remember the Mark Price situation there? They haven't had any real stability. Sanchez left. He didn't get fired. He just left up and left for, an assistant spot at UVA, which he ended up being the interim head coach. But Charlotte's another one to watch. I think that job could open up. So, yeah, I'm kind of fascinated by this upcoming season and what happens in the American. Who are these teams that could potentially step up? Let me ask you this, though, Greg. Would you still have Memphis number 1?
I go with South Florida number 1. I've got them over Memphis just because, again, I feel better about the coaching situation with South Florida. I feel like they did a good job of being able to have a blend of guys coming in via the transfer portal. And if I were picking for overall most wins, I probably would go with Memphis because I think that it might take a little bit of time for South Florida to be able to find their sea legs. But I do think that in the end, South Florida just is a little bit a better team, and I just still have my question marks with Penny Hardaway, even though I will say he's improved as a coach from year number one when it was really, really bad.
That's interesting. So you have South Florida ahead of Memphis. See, that would be phenomenal to see. But yeah, I mean, the conference is in a weird phase, I would say. Like, it's not nearly as strong as they need Wichita. Like, if you're talking about the conference from a bird's eye point of view, you need these schools to step up. Like Charlotte, I know that they haven't been good in a while or really good in a while. I don't understand why it doesn't work there. ECU is one that, like, I think should be flirting with the NCAA tournament. The blueprint is not far away. There's a school called UNC Wilmington in Eastern North Carolina. It's not far away. That should be your blueprint as far as I know. Like, as far as you can see what they do. They basically take a lot of NC State and Carolina transfers or former coaches. Like, the blueprint's pretty obvious there. But the conference needs Temple and Wichita State to get back to where they were. I'm not even saying like John Chaney days where Temple had Mark Macon and company and making the Elite Eight. I'm talking about just being, right around the bubble. You know what I mean? Like being right around a decent, I feel like so many years with Fran Dunphy, they were a play-in team. If they could just get back to that level, because losing the teams they've lost over the past few years has really, I think, made the conference a lot weaker. UTSA doesn't have much of a basketball history. The Rice Owls, not as much either. Some of the teams they brought in, besides FAU, which obviously, but even FAU's is short-lived. The conference as a whole just needs a pickup as far as, like, if I'm their commissioner, I'm sitting there saying, like, why are we not, hey, Wichita, what do we got to do to help you out here? Like, Wichita, they got a passionate fan base. They care about basketball. They've been relevant for decades. Just not the past couple of years. They need them to really step it up. And if anything, do you think Wichita, this is an interesting thing, like now that I think about it, do you think they're another like casualty to like Nebraska football? Ever since they joined the Big Ten, the shoe doesn't fit, right? Like, or Arkansas back in the 90s when they joined the SEC, they were like a historic program, but ever since then, it seems like they just haven't been able to get solid ground. Wichita, I wonder if they regret the move to the AAC. What do you think?
With Wichita, I think that it's just a case where they're sort of away from the rest of the American, and that sort of hurts them a little bit. And I do think that for Wichita State, I think that they would be able to do much better if they were in a conference where it was just a little bit less travel. I wish that they would be able to find just a conference where they'd be a little bit closer to those Midwest teams, because it does feel like they're a little bit out of place right now in the American. And I don't know if they necessarily regret leaving the conference, but I do think that they have been swallowed up whole by the fact that you've got NIL, and in this era, you've got two teams out there in the great state of Kansas, and Kansas State and Kansas, that really does sort of eat them alive and just has deeper pockets in them. I think that that's been a big issue for them.
Yeah, I just wonder, like, if you're a fan of Wichita State, besides Tulsa and maybe North Texas, I guess, but I don't think there's much history with North Texas. I think Tulsa they actually have a legit history with. But is there any other schools that really, like, to me, I would much rather play in the Missouri Valley or something where you're going up against schools that there's a history that goes back a while, and your neighbors probably are graduates from Northern Iowa or something. You know what I mean? There's a better shot of that. You're just like, oh yeah, we're playing UTSA this weekend. You know what I mean? Like, but the conference needs Wichita to step up, man. If Wichita can get back to where, honestly, from like the 80s, back when they had Xavier McDaniel and company, all the way until the Greg Marshall Final Four run, it had been just a rock solid program. Yeah, there was a couple years they were down. I think they got in some NCAA trouble, but like they were kind of like Creighton. If anything, like they were like Creighton before Creighton became Creighton. If I'm the AAC commissioner, I would just say, man, we got to get our basketball schools up because they haven't been up. Even Memphis has been disappointing. I think it's a point of emphasis for them, to become a better basketball conference, because they've taken some major hits. Like, you look at them 5 years ago, that conference was much better than it is today. Yeah, hopefully that happens, and hopefully it's East Carolina. May the Schwartz be with us, because Mike Schwartz, I think, hey, let's go. Turn that corner. Let's get us to the tournament.
And a lot of people forget, you're number one in the American. They actually had the national title winner in their conference in Louisville. The one-and-done national championship for the American Conference with Louisville.
No, we got one with UConn. We got one with UConn, too.
Yes.
with Kevin Ollie.
Two teams that left immediately afterwards. And I mean, the American actually has 2 titles over the last decade. I don't think that a lot of people had that on their bingo card, but you know what? We always have on our bingo card a guy in Colby Dant who does an amazing job looking at this great game of college basketball. Colby, you're a wealth of information, my friend. You're hard at work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, so love to get people at home know what's all on tap for you, and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Thanks for the plug, man, and always a pleasure, Greg. And yeah, right now, I mean, look, I cover all of college sports, college baseball, college basketball, college football. Right now, we're previewing 136 teams in college football. I was just at ACC Media Days, got to talk to Bill Belichick, got to talk to several other coaches in that conference, Brett Pry and everything. I was at Mountain West Media Days a week before that, so been heavy into football, but don't worry, I've been focusing on basketball in my downtime too. So when the season goes live with college basketball, we're live every night there on the College Basketball Experience. And when the season's live with football every single night with the College Football Experience, those come together on YouTube, youtube.com/The College Experience. We're on Twitter at TCE on SGPN, and I'm on Twitter at TheColbyD. Thank you for letting me jump on your show, brother.
Always great to be able to have Colby aboard. Unfortunately for Bill Belichick, he might not be on to Cincinnati, but we're always on a great chat whenever we've got our good friend Colby aboard. So big thanks, Colby, for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM. Name does not matter, so as per usual, please send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you are able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and I am with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season, all 365 days of the year, leap year 366 days, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.